marba me lan jen jen gambo du som she jai kun jen karma ba je je jong jen jen ba zen nan dang rin dan za son ba den ro ba zo za lan ja jan ja lang an yin pe nyam me do gan dam bo gan ja la so one den zoing gan ja la man Jumba Jino Namda Jin Jalo Shenlo Gom Ji Kang Pa Zong Ba Shin Zenor Gon Lai Jajin Me Padang and there and the die jembe gom jela nyen go shen ba me ba jin jelo meng gom jin go wo song ba shin Meng an der go jembe la ma la John do zor wan de ben gon jela Jemen me gun jewa jin jelo Ying me gom jing a je zom ba shi Yang zha ra dom be ngo wo zo ma de Ma zhen den ga ren zhom be gom je la Gom zha lo don zha wa jin je lo Nam dong o wun zhong hu zong ba shin Yam ma yin je riang zha wa la Ma ga ru ba jar we gom je la Korne yer me do ma jen je la Je wa gon du yon da la ma da Men jen je ma la lo je jin Sa da lan ji yon de ra zo ne Do je jang ge go ba nyor do Good afternoon, everyone. It was proposed by one of you that we start this afternoon by giving some kind of coordination between the topics in the text we've been examining and the liturgy of the combined sadhana of the Vidyadhara Gurus, which is what we practice here on the 10th day of every month. Now, Lama Tratop taught this text with visualizations and so on in great detail many years ago. So I'm not going to repeat the instructions he gave then, because you can get the, what are they called, MP3s and probably the transcript from the bookstore, yeah. Yeah. So that will actually explain the details. But I think what would be best is for us to go through each section in the outline of the commentary, the clear guidance, and show how they correspond to the text. So the liturgy begins, of course, with the prayer to Guru Rinpoche, the prayer to the successive lives of Tetsuen Barway Dorje, and then the lineage prayer for this practice. And those are not, there's no explanation of those in particular in the root text except for the necessity of devotion. So, we begin on page 8. We all need to be using the same edition so that this makes sense. Page 8 of the liturgy and page 40 of the commentary. Now, page 8 and 9 of the liturgy present the preliminary torma to the lords and ladies of place, that is to say, the non-human beings who occupy, reside in, and have some sovereignty over the location where the practice is being done. That is not presented in the commentary. Then we turn to page 11, which is the visualization of the sources of refuge and the repetition of the refuge vow. That starts in the commentary on the final paragraph of page 40 and goes to the end of the first paragraph on page 41. Then we turn to the generation of bodhicitta, which is on the top of page 12 in the liturgy, and is presented in the middle section of page 41. Right after the generation of bodhicitta, and not particularly mentioned at this point in the commentary, are the gathering of accumulations to the 7 branches and the dissolution of the sources of refuge. Those are also found on page 12 in the liturgy. And then we turn to the banishment of obstructors and the giving of torma to creditors and obstructors. In the commentary, those are starting at the bottom half of page 41, and that occupies the remainder of the bottom line of page 12 and the top 2/3 of page 13 in the liturgy. Next, the commentary describes the perimeters in the next paragraph on page 41, and that is described very briefly in 2 lines of text on the bottom of page 13, immediately followed by the other preliminaries described in the text, the opening of the symbolic doors, the salutation, and the confession. Those are on the bottom of page 41, and they occupy the bottom of page 13 in the liturgy and the top line of page 14. Following that is the descent of blessings, which is described on the 3rd paragraph on page 42 and occupies the middle section of page 14 in the liturgy. That is followed by the blessing of the offerings, which is the 4th paragraph in the commentary on page 42 and occupies the remainder of page 14 and the top half of page 15. Then the final preliminary is the clarification of samadhi. That is described in the second to last main paragraph on page 42 and occupies in the liturgy the bottom half of page 15. As we turn on to page 16 in the liturgy, we begin the main practice. And that is presented, the first parts of the main practice, the visualization, the three samadhis and the visualization of the deities, are presented in the commentary on page 42, the bottom quarter of the text, beginning with the main format, and continue in the commentary up to almost the end of page 43, where it says that is the generation stage of clear appearance. In the liturgy, that continues until the second line on page 19, and that segues into the sealing or purification of impure body, speech, and mind, and the receiving the empowerments of the five wisdoms. That is explained on the bottom of page 43, and that same paragraph in the commentary segues into an explanation of the invitation and dissolution of the wisdom deities. In the liturgy, that's on the middle and bottom of page 19, continuing through the top 2/3 of page 20. Then in the commentary on page 44, in the middle of the page, we have the offering of seats, and then that segues right into the presentation of the very offerings, of the various offerings. So that is the bottom of page 20, all of page 21, 22, and page 23 up to the middle of the page, Tirabam Dharmadhatu Aho. Then that brings us to the middle of page 45 in the commentary. And the next section is the praises, which are described on the second to last paragraph on page 45, and in the liturgy occupy the bottom half of page 23, all of page 24, and all of page 25 except for the last line. Now, the next thing in the liturgy on the bottom line of page 25 is the separation of the repetition chambers, or the wisdom circle, and that's found just on that bottom line. Then what follows that is the appeal for repetition. This is on the top 3 lines of page 26. This is asking for the deity's blessings that your mantra repetition be successful. This begins into this leads to the repetition stage. So all of this is part of that. So we've reached the bottom paragraph of page 45, and that is going to the 4 types of repetition continue through page 46. The top 3/4 of page 47. And so those are found in the liturgy on pages 26 and 27 and 28, those 3. not mentioned separately in the text, but always done in group practice, or after the repetition, the reciting the vowels and consonants, the presentation of what's called the division or thousandfold division offerings and confession, and then reciting the Vajrasattva mantra 3 times. And those are all found on page 29 in the liturgy. Also not mentioned in the text, but always done, according to Lama Trotop, in the Tersar or New Terma tradition, is before the feast, the presentation of offering tormas to at least some of the protectors. So here on pages 31, 32, 33, and the top half of page 34 are a series of offerings to the 4 principal protectors of these Guru Sadhanas. And then we come to the feast. Now, at this point in the text, in the commentary, there's a discussion of the amount of approach, signs of siddhi, and so on. That's on page 47 and 48. And then page 49, the top half, describes the elaborate receiving of siddhi during a drupchen, or great accomplishment. That's not done at this point in the text. So at this point, we begin with the feast, the tsok, which is described beginning on page 49. And page 49 initially presents the meaning of it, and then begins to go through the stages. First, on the bottom paragraph of page 49, in one line, it describes the banishment of obstructors, which is done on page 34, in the middle of the line with the short Hayagriva mantra. And then comes the blessing of the feast substances, and that occupies the remaining half of page 34 with the mantras. And then on page 35. And then on 35, we continue to the invitation of the feast recipients or guests, the top 2/3, and the first feast offering on the bottom third of page 35. That ends on page 36, and that is the consecration of the feast, described on the bottom of page 49, the first offering of the feast, which is presented in the top half of page 50. The top half of page 50 also describes fulfillment and confession, which together constitute the second of the 3 initial feast offerings. The consecration of the fulfillment offerings and the presentation of them in the liturgy is on page 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, and the top third of page 42. The middle of page 42 is the connected confession. Then the bottom 2 lines of page 42 are the liberation offering, which is described in the first, let's say the 3rd paragraph on page 50, where it says last is the liberation offering. And that occupies the bottom third of page 42, and along with the offering of union in the context of the feast, the top 2/3 of page 43. Following that is a abbreviation of the feast to its mantras, the mantras of consecration, invitation, offering, confession, liberation, and actually the leftovers. And that is repeated a number of times. The number is up to the umze, the cantor or chant leader, and it's done so that you accumulate merit by offering repeated feasts. Sometimes people will accumulate 100,000 feasts in a large group, where if you have like 100 people, you only need to do 1,000 to count 100,000. And that occupies the bottom half of page 43. Then we come to the distribution of the feast substances to the brother and sister yogis and yoginis. That occurs on the top two lines of page 44 in the commentary, and is described on on the bottom of page 50 44 in the liturgy and page 50 in the commentary. Then we have the consecration of the leftovers, and that occupies in the liturgy the remainder of page 44, along with the invitation or summoning of the leftover recipients and the presentation of offerings to them. In the commentary, that is described on the top half of page 51. Then we make an aspiration to seal the feast on the middle of page 45, and then there is an exhortation or appeal to the deities after the feast per se is completed for their blessings and assistance. Then we have the concluding torma offerings. First, the proclamation to the protectors. That is described on page 51, the bottom half. Bottom half of page 51 describes the proclamation offering, and the also on page 46 in the liturgy, a further exhortation and torma offering. On page 47 in the liturgy is the offering to the earth goddesses, or the Tenma of Tibet. And then on page 48, the top half of the page is the horse dance, or Tadro, the dance of Hayagriva. And that is described on the bottom of page 51 in the commentary. Then what follows after that is a brief ritual for self-empowerment on pages 48, 49, 50, to the middle of page 51. And that is only done to receive siddhi at the end of a retreat, group retreat or solitary retreat, or it may be done by the master if they're preparing to give the empowerment. What follows after that is the concluding offerings to the deities invited for the feast, as well as those who split off from you for repetition, and praise to them, confession of failings, and entering them into asking them to remain in the supports. So that is the bottom 2/3 of page 51 in the liturgy, and the all of page 52. That is described in the commentary, and now it's going to be confusing because they're on the same page number, on the top half of page 52. The middle of page 52 in the commentary describes the dissolution or withdrawal of the visualization. In the liturgy, that's on page 53, and first the dissolution or withdrawal, and then the re-arising as the deities, as described on in the middle and bottom of page 52. And then comes the dedication of virtue on the very bottom of page 52 in the commentary, the very bottom of page 53 in the liturgy. And then the declaration of auspiciousness, which occupies the entirety of page 54 in the liturgy and is described in the second paragraph of page 53 in the commentary. What follows in the text is the vase generation, which is done by the master if they're giving the empowerment, and another form of self-empowerment. That's on pages 55 and 56 and 57. We don't do that because we're not giving empowerments. And then after that is the Song of Samantabhadra, the Great Perfection Prayer and Aspiration. So that's how these two texts fit together. And if you go through each of these in detail, such as the stages of repetition of the mantras, you'll see that they correspond one by one to what's described in the text. Okay, any questions?
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about what the dissolution and what the re-arising is supposed to do?
Well, the dissolution and the re-arising?
No, I understand the dissolution, but the re-arising, and then is it sort of when you have the first thought? When do you do that?
Okay. The purpose of the re-arising is so that you first of all, so that you maintain the threefold bearing throughout your daily activities. And secondly, to ensure that you continue to receive the blessings of the deities and their protection. And also, especially, just as the withdrawal corresponds to and therefore is helpful to prepare for death, the re-arising corresponds to and is helpful to prepare for the bardo. And so if you get in the habit of whenever you wake up or whenever you arise from any kind of non-conceptual meditation, if you get in the habit of arising as the deity, then that may be sufficient to cause you to do that in the bardo, in which case your mental body would take the form of the deity and you'd achieve liberation as the Sambhogakaya. If you recognize the ground clear light at the moment of death, you would achieve liberation as the Dharmakaya. So those are the main reasons. The secondary reason is to purify the fixation on any of these fixation you may have developed on the deity's attributes or solidity, and then to purify fixation on any concepts you might have about emptiness, such as it being nothingness or nothing whatsoever, and so on.
So is it appropriate, can it be appropriate if one loses mindfulness and the recognition of the loss of awareness, like you have become distracted, to arise as a deity, or you want to just go back into awareness?
I haven't asked that question that I remember myself, but I once heard an audio tape from the early 1980s of His Holiness Sutta Rinpoche describing this and saying that you can do it either way. You can do the withdrawal repeatedly, so re-arising and then withdraw again repeatedly, in order to reinforce that during a session of meditation. Or, he said, if I remember correctly, you can simply return to the state of meditation and only do the withdrawal once and the re-arising once. In group practice, the withdrawal is done once and the re-arising is done once.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about the auspiciousness at the end? I don't really understand what that is or
Yeah,
what we're supposed to be doing.
You know, it's a tricky concept. Auspicious in English is not, I suppose, a bad translation, but it's a little on the clunky side, and it doesn't have any kind of, it doesn't have much zip to it as a word. Tashi is the Tibetan word, and ta is a very nice word because it can mean colorful or bright. And shi means the nature of something or the way something is. So tashi means kind of a bright, colorful, splendid nature or attribute of things. So what you are invoking is the splendor, the benevolence, the blessing of all the deities in the form of their appearing in the sky before you and casting flowers and declaring auspiciousness and whatnot, to cause that to fill your life and fill your world. You know, I've never heard this said. I mean, that much I've heard said. But what I'm about to say, I've never heard said, but I associate it with, because of this word ta, having this concept. It's the same word as Lama Totop's name. You know, Totop is a portmanteau word. It's a contraction of Tashi Topja, auspicious king of power. So ta has the connotation of bright and colorful. So I've always associated it with the decor of Tibetan shrine rooms. This vigorous and extremely artistic invocation of the colorful splendor of the mind. You know, like when you walk into a room like this room, you're struck, even if you're used to being here, you're struck by the amount of color. There is so much to look at in this room that even those of us who have been in this room for weeks at a time and done so much haven't really had the chance to look closely at each and every painting, in each and every statue, and all the splendid color. And but again, I'm kind of making that up because I've never actually heard a Lama say that it means that it's related to the artistic colors, but I associate it with that. So Tashi is everything good. May there be goodness. It's most basically it's a prayer for everything good. But it's more than a prayer because it's actually an invocation of the energy of goodness.
The receiving of the cities, are there any, what are the signs that those cities are being received?
They're described in the text on page...
That was when I jotted it down, when you were going over that.
Page 48, the middle paragraph on that page. The signs include auspicious dreams of purification and so on. And those are signs that city is close, and that's when you receive it. So there are kind of two steps to it. There's seeing the signs, and then there's when the signs of siddhi or attainment have arisen, and they have to be reliable, like repeated, not just you have one good dream or something. Then you would engage in the ritual of receiving siddhi.
So, you know, I've received cities before, but apparently I've never received cities before. So, is there, do you just keep on doing it until you actually receive the cities, I guess, or?
Well, with a generation stage practice, you follow the prescription and the particular liturgy and commentary. So if it says, do this many of the mantra, or do it for this long, and then go on to the next step, that's what you do. You would also come to an individual agreement if you're doing solitary retreat. with your retreat director, who would say to you, and they have to obviously be someone who's done the practice, you should do this for this long and then this for this long. And nowadays, from the guidance I've received, most teachers don't emphasize paying too much attention to the dreams, to good and bad dreams or experiences. You notice them, but if they're good, you don't want to cling to them, and if they're bad, you don't want to make a big deal out of them. So in practical terms, people usually do the receiving of siddhi when you've completed either a set period or a set number of mantras of retreat.
Okay, thank you.
He's joking.
Oh. Okay, Linda Lee. Are the accumulation of mantra repetitions for each stage, such as approach, accomplishment, etc., supposed to be accumulated in a retreat setting?
Yes.
Or can it be accumulated in a daily practice?
You know, there's the traditional answer to that is they must be accumulated in retreat. It's not that there is no benefit in daily practice, but first of all, most of the practitioners here aren't capable of chanting the long liturgy as part of their daily practice, so they would only be doing the first part anyway. So it's different mantras in the short practice. The final answer is, if Lama Tatop, who represents this tradition and knows the ropes of it, tells you can accumulate a mantra and count it in daily practice, then you can. If he tells you you have to do it in retreat, then you have to do it in retreat. The rules are slightly different. There's more or less stringent with different practices, so it has to be case by case.
That's all I had.
What?
That's all I had.
Oh.
Only one question.
Any other questions? Yes.
Wait.
Thank you. I wanted to thank Lama for presenting this all to us and to revealing all the complexities and the correct way of approaching this practice. I am a beginner and I have very little experience with this, but I wanted to know, ask Lama if you could explain or express basically how to approach a deity or guru using gratitude in light of the fact that we're suffering and we want to be free of suffering. We want to fix it, and also including myself, would like the guru to fix it or the deity to fix it.
It's interesting. Most Buddhists in this country seem to be so concerned with avoiding a kind of salvation mentality of that some being can just rescue you. Many people seem to be so concerned with that we sometimes ignore or choose not to focus on the fact that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas really can help us. That's why they're there. They really can. And specifically the idea of fixing, you know, the Sanskrit word for Dharma is obviously Dharma, which has about 10 meanings, but principally it means things like spirituality, and sometimes it can also mean duty, and then in a very different sense, it can mean a thing, like a phenomenon, is a dharma. An object, strictly speaking, any object of the mind or the mental consciousness. But the Tibetan word for dharma is chu. And if you look at the derivation of chu, it means amelioration, fixing. So, as much as we are concerned with not being naively or overly dependent on the blessings of the Guru and the blessings of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and deities, I think we should be careful not to overly disparage or underestimate that aspect of things. Especially because the one thing that we really need to practice, whether we practice deity meditation or not, but to do any kind of successful spiritual practice, the one thing that all the masters and all the texts tell us we need is faith. We don't need to be smart. We don't need to be learned. We don't need to be good at mudras and know how to play the instruments. And we don't need to have all of these texts in our minds so that we can repeat them and so on. The people who need to be clever at explanation are translators and teachers. But that has nothing to do with your own personal development. Because your own personal spiritual development has to be non-conceptual. And as the Bodhisattva Maitreya wrote, I think it's in the Uttara Tantra, but anyway, it's in one of his 5 famous treatises, absolute truth can only be realized through faith. It cannot be realized through reasoning. All reasoning can do at best, and usually it doesn't even do that, is disprove error or misconceptions. So disprove the impossibility of a truly existent, disprove the possibility, of a truly existent self. But that in itself does not give us the non-conceptual wisdom of a self-apprehending, self-illuminating, self-recognizing wisdom, mind. The only thing that can do that is faith. Now, the accumulation of merit is very important, but the accumulation of merit is principally, from what I can tell, from what I've been told and from what I've read, is principally gained through acts of faith. So I think that gratitude, even if there's a little bit of desperate crying and calling to the Guru to fix things, is good. And we see this. We have liturgies called Crying to the Guru from Afar. In fact, it's a whole class of liturgy in the Tibetan tradition. Each lineage has several of them. And you're definitely, if you read what those texts say, it's a cry of desperation, like a lost child calling for their mother. And I think I think it's, and I could be wrong, I mean, because I know that my OCD has sometimes played into this, and I mistook anxiety and compulsive or obsessive thinking for renunciation when I was young. But I think at the same time that unless there's a special problem like mine, desperation is good. Desperation, I think, is good.
Thank
Yes,
you, Lama.
you're
Thank you
welcome.
so much.
Any other questions? Okay. Yes. No, go ahead, please.
So I had a question, I guess, about how this all kind of fits in on the path. Like, as far from what I've read, you have generation stage, you have completion stage, but then you have the three roots. And, this is all very much about the Guru Sadhana, and then you have Yidam, and then you have the third one, which is Dakini or Dharmapala.
Okay.
Is it the case that it is up to the guru, whoever's guru, to assign them one of those, or just in general, how does it kind of, the path progress?
Okay. Broadly speaking, if you look at our tradition in general, and here I'm not speaking solely of the Barway Dorje lineage, although it would apply to that, there are two ways the path has been presented always. And usually they call these Lam Yonsu Zopa and Lam Dumbuwa, which means the complete path and the bits and pieces path. When someone begins a system of practice such as this in relative youth and good health, and they have a willingness to learn, then they would pursue the complete path. And the order might not be absolutely the same order, but generally speaking, they would first do a complete set of preliminary practices, and then a guru sadhana like this, and then at least one yidam sadhana, which in this tradition would most likely be Yamantaka or Vajrakilaya, but there are others too. And then they would do a Dakini practice, in this lineage, the white Kachari. And then and this means in retreat, they would do all of these in retreat. And then having done that, then they would practice the, what are called in the context of this tradition, the common and uncommon completion stages. So usually they're called the completion stage and the great completion or great perfection, Dzogchen. So that would be the complete path in the default order. It's not always done in that order, though. But if someone approaches this or begins the tradition when they are older, then they might be given a kind of more on-the-spot bits and pieces approach. And this has always been taught in both the Kagyu and Nyingma traditions. I can't speak for the others because I never really studied them. And but again, that would conform to their particular needs and situation. So in some cases, I've heard of many instances where elderly people in Tibet would go to a master would request the pointing out instruction would receive that and would meditate. They would need further guidance and so on, but meditate basically on what we would call Mahamudra or Dzogchen for the remainder of their lives. In other cases, if they were, and that was largely a concession to the distance of travel, being elderly, possibly even illiterate in traditional societies and so on. The slightly more, and then there are gradations of completeness, right? The more usual, well, you could call it bits and pieces path, is to do the complete set of preliminaries first, and then the practice of Mahamudra or Dzogchen, depending upon the tradition. And that is the shortest semi-complete path, because technically, most preliminary practices are the preliminaries for Mahamudra or Dzogchen, and there are others too, but those are the ones that people are familiar with. So it is possible for someone to simply do Ngondro and then Mahamudra or Dzogchen. That's a very concise path, and there are many teachers who do teach that. Then a slightly more elaborate path, if the person has more time, needs more structure or support, and especially if they really like deity practice, is they would do the complete Ngondro and then one deity. Now it could be a sadhana, a single sadhana that includes all the three roots, and there are many of those, such as the embodiment of the three jewels, the Guru Sadhana of Karma Pakshi, and many, many, many of those. And that would be a very concise, sort of all-in-one generation stage. They wouldn't have to do anything else. And then they would go on after that to begin, or concurrently, to practice Mahamudra or Dzogchen. And then there are those who want to do a lot of deity practice. Then they would do the complete Ngondro and then the three roots, probably in the usual order, then Mahamudra or Dzogchen. And then there are those who really want to do the complete path of means and the path of liberation. So they would do the complete Ngondro, the sadhanas of the three roots, the 6 dharmas of Naropa, or Niguma, if they're Kagyu, or the equivalent in the Nyingma tradition, if they're Nyingma, and then Mahamudra and Dzogchen. Now, the complication is that each sublineage has a slightly different order for how these things are done. So, so those are basically the different kinds of ways that it can be done. So that's the long answer. The short answer is it should be settled individually. You go to your spiritual director, which, if this is your main gig, then it would be Lama Trapdop. And you go to him if you're in doubt as to what to practice next or how much of the practice you're doing now to continue with, and you ask his advice, and he would prescribe. If we look at the literature of the Vajrayana in India at the time of the Siddhas, and we have biographies of them from the Sanskrit that are in the translated treatises and have been translated into Tibetan and from there into English, and we look at the history in Tibet, we can see that it was always very individual. Where you get absolute standardization, you do this and this and this, and this, is in the great monastic retreats. So in the great monastic retreats, everybody has to be doing the same thing at the same time. So there has to be coordination. But for an individual, especially, it's better to have this thing resolved by your personal teacher on an individual basis. Okay. So, first of all, let's dedicate the virtue. And then please don't forget that Kathy asked that everyone take some of the food home, because otherwise it's just going to sit there and not be eaten and go bad, which is a horrible waste. Oh, and when I teach next, which who knows when that's going to be, but it will be sometime, what I've suggested to our programmer, and we've agreed on it, is that we're going to go through the meditation instructions contained at the end of the section of this book on Ngondro. Barway Dorje taught the Ngondro in detail, and Lama taught it in even more detail, so I'm not going to go through that again. But at the end of that section, there's a very powerful set of instructions on search for the mind and scrutiny of the mind. And since most people are involved at some point or level of that, and it's not something that is made secret like the actual Dzogchen teachings, then I think it would be good for us to do that. And you have the book, it's in the front of the same book. Okay, so let's dedicate the virtue. Sonam de ye tam je zeng ba nye tom ne nye me ra nam pam je ne jenga na je ba la drum ba ye sim ben zo le ro wa jo ke wan de yin je wo gun sanam ye shen zo zo de sanam ye je le jong we dam ba gun ye dom ba jo jang jo zem ne ram bo je man je ba nam je jo je jem ba nyam ba me ba dong gon ne gon do ba wa jo sem jen dam je de dan den jo je ngan ro dam je da do dong ba jo jang je sam ba gan da sa jo ba de da gun je lam dro ba jo sang je re je ze dam be gar jal gun de jan do ling ba ye zam je me jong de bu song ha je si je jong da ra ja be ta ji. Thank you all.